So let's jump into topic 2. Let's continue talking about games. Let's talk about gaps in knowledge with games. This is a bit of a kind of a revisit. We talked about IGN's top 100 games list, just kind of seeing like what I had played, what I hadn't played, seeing where I kind of stood on that list. So I wanted to revisit that topic and talk about just, some omissions, I guess, in my gaming history of things I just haven't touched, haven't played, have no experience with. And there's a few standouts. So let's jump on into it. So a lot of the Nintendo library, I would say that I'm definitely missing out on. I think, once again, if you watched our top 100 games podcast from a few weeks ago, I talked about how I didn't really own a console myself until the PlayStation 2. I guess before that would be the Game Boy Advance. That was my first, technically, video game. Like, I own this. There was the computer that, I would use at my parents' house, but it wasn't mine. The Game Boy Advance was mine. The PlayStation 2, we got as a family, but primarily was mine. But those were my first experiences with games in my own house. The rest was just outside looking in, go to families, go to friends. They happen to have something, we'll play them. So I did get a little bit of experience with like the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, and the N64, but never fully dived into those libraries. I would say probably with the N64 specifically, the ones I dived into the most were like Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. Those ones we played a bunch with friends. GoldenEye we talked about. That was another dip of the toe, but that's a memory of like that was one we played a lot. I'm trying to think. I think we did a little bit of like the Star Wars, the Pod Racer, doing those. We talked about the Super Nintendo with obviously Super Mario Bros. Or rather, that was not the Super Nintendo. That was just the NES. Excuse me. So Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt. And then just really quick glimpses at like a glimpse at Zelda, a glimpse at, I think my buddy had F-Zero that I watched him play. What else was on Super Mario 64, the big one. How could I forget that? So things like this, I never fully delved into. Like, I think I had only watched Super Mario 64, never played it myself. I haven't played any of the Metroids. Zelda, the only Zelda game I've personally played is one of the more recent ones. No, not Breath of the Wild. It was Link to the Past? No, Link's Awakening, the cutesy remade one for Nintendo Switch. That was my first Zelda game, other than a quick dip of the toe into the NES, which I don't even recall the title for, just might have been Zelda, or Legend of Zelda, and being lost as a kid. So a lot of the Nintendo library I would kind of missed. Donkey Kong Country, we actually talked about recently on stream. I played the Game Boy Advance version of that, but I think that was another one I missed on the N64. Played a little bit of Mario Kart, but I think more of the GameCube was when I jumped into that kind of stuff. So that's a big gap. If we're going to continue on to Nintendo, I didn't own a Nintendo system other than the Game Boy Advance until the Nintendo Wii. And even for that, that was kind of like dipping the toes into it. I never like fully dived in to what Nintendo had to offer. And I think that might have just been because obviously you had other consoles, but not having that history with these characters, it wasn't really enticing. Like, oh, let's go see what Link and Zelda are doing. Let's go see what Samus is doing in Metroid. It didn't really call out to me just because maybe that history wasn't there. Pokemon was probably the deepest franchise I got into, obviously with that being more on the Game Boy side of things. That was more where the intrigue was with Nintendo. So a lot of the Mario games I missed out on. Mario Galaxy, I already talked about 64. Sunshine I played a little bit at friends' houses, and I did enjoy that one. Metroids, once again, haven't played. Zelda, haven't played. Pikmin I enjoyed on GameCube. I think I enjoyed more of the multiplayer and that chaos. Smash Bros, another one that was just prevalent with the multiplayer stuff. Going back to Pokemon Snap. I played a little bit. I do remember at my mom's coworker's house, they had a son who was very into, had a big N64 collection. And I remember playing Pokemon Snap at his house for a bit. But that was a game that I know a lot of people talked about, a lot of people loved. I remember streaming that for the first time all the way through a few years ago. And like seeing the depth of the puzzles, like nothing, I guess, super extravagant in terms of difficulty, but just the magic of like, wait, if I do something different here, that allows me to potentially open up a different path. Some of them I know as a kid I never would have figured out for sure. But seeing just the slight differences that they could do, or have you do rather as a player, to take these different paths and progress in the story was very cool. So yeah, at least on the Nintendo side, that was a big gap. If we're going to talk about the PlayStation era, so PS1, I know there was a lot of JRPGs and RPGs on there that hit it big, that a lot of people were into. For example, the Final Fantasy series, and I know I've talked about this before, but Final Fantasy VII, that's a big omission in my knowledge. Even with the remake, well, I had a coworker, like I was just like assisting with classes, but one of the main instructors was very kind. He's like, hey, try this game out. Let me borrow FF7. And just me, I don't know, didn't click. I was like, graphics look bad. I'm used to my awesome PS2 graphics, whatever it was. Very simple stuff. So I remember running around Midgard a little bit with Final Fantasy VII. I did enjoy the turn-based mechanics of it, just because I had some experience with that with the Game Boy Advance, with Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. But yeah, for some reason it just didn't click. And I've been meaning to go back into it. Whether it's the original, I don't know if I would fully dip my toe into that, but at least with the remakes, obviously this is the time to play them, with FF7 Remake coming out, boy, at this year, or at this point, I don't know how many years ago. You have Intergrade, you have Rebirth literally coming out in a month or two. This is the time to jump back into it. I know it's a little bit mix, or a little bit of a change or modification of the story to make it new, to make it engaging, but that's one I've been like, the regret is there of like, I should have given that a bigger chance, just because of how well renowned FF7 is and how many people absolutely love that game. I would say that's a big one definitely for me, that's like, oof. In terms of the regret at least, there's a lot of these I'm like, no, there's no regret there or want to play it. But FF, or Final Fantasy, I'm going to stop saying FF. Final Fantasy 7 I would say is one that I'm like, man, I should have played that. And I can still, which is the bad thing. I just haven't taken the time to do it. So that's a big one in terms of that. I'm trying to think of what else on the PlayStation side of things was huge. I know ages ago, when Gifted Dim was on as a podcast guest, we talked about Kojima. We talked about the Metal Gear series. We talked about Death Stranding. And I was like, Death Stranding is kind of going to be my first experience with Hideo Kojima. And we briefly talked about Metal Gear. And that's another one I've heard pop up a lot. I don't know too much about the story. It seems a little convoluted from what I've heard in terms of Snake and his doppelgangers. I don't know. Seems like there's multiple versions of him running around. I don't understand the premise at all. I think the most I've watched of Metal Gear, and it's not even a mainline, is Resurgence. It's one of the ones with Raiden, and it's all action and fast and all that. I do remember watching a little bit of 5 when it came out, just because it was the talk of the town at the time. But yeah, that's one I don't know much about. Do not know much about. I know it's stealth orientated. I know you can hide in a cardboard box. I know you get the little exclamation point over your head if you alert guards or whatever. But yeah, that one I have no idea what's the buzz about it, what's going on there. So I'd say that's a big one. On the Xbox side of things, I did play the Halos. I guess Halo 1 I technically did not play, but I did play 2, 3, ODST. Played a little bit of 4, but I think at that point I was kind of burnt out of it. So I can't think of anything big on the Xbox side that I missed, because I did play the 360 generation. Didn't play the original Xbox, so maybe your Fables. That's something I missed. I did try Fable 3. Didn't get its hooks in me in the initial beginning of the game, so I was like, yeah. Oh yeah. So what I have up here to try and help me jog my memory of like what else has come out. I have a list of best-selling video games, so I'll look through that quickly, see if there's anything, at least big omissions of like, oh yeah, that's huge. And I guess one right here is Sonic the Hedgehog. I do have a little experience with Sonic. I think it was another case of like dipping the toe here and there when I did get the opportunity. I mentioned having a little bit of experience with Sega Genesis. I had a neighbor across the street. We would play, oh crap, it's not Virtual Fighter. It was like a Power Rangers knockoff fighting game. 1v1. V-Troopers? That might be it. But I remember playing that with him, constantly getting beat. But that was probably the most handheld or hands-on experience I had with the Genesis. The only experience besides that with the Genesis I did have was a Sega CD, I believe it was, on the PC, which had like a wide variety of games. Comic Zone, Shining Force. They did have Sonic on there, Vector Man, and Kid Chameleon. Those I dipped my toes into a lot. I would say Shining Force was probably the one I put the most time into, along with Comic Zone. Never got far into them, but that was where I spent most of my time. I did play Sonic, and I enjoyed it. It was one of those things I just didn't understand. I don't know really what I was doing, or felt like I was doing much. It was just like, go to the right. Okay, I gotta figure out how to go from left to right. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. And it was that. I did enjoy the introduction of Knuckles. Obviously, he was the hardcore, like, edgy one. So he was cool, and playing around as him and gliding and then climbing the walls with the Knuckles on his hands. That was fun. But yeah, that was another one I never really got into a lot. I would say, once again, circling back to the Game Boy Advance, probably Sonic. Oh boy, was it just Sonic Advance? It might have been. So you could play as the four characters, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. You could play as them and go through the levels. And then you also had a Chow Garden, which I think I spent more of my time in the Chow Garden raising that little dude, playing the mini games with him, trying to figure out how to get all the cool stuff to decorate and whatnot. That was a lot of fun. But that was probably the game in terms of the Sonic franchise I put the most into. Other than that, it was just the dipping of the toes. We talked about Mario Kart. First one I owned was Mario Kart Wii. Didn't play it on the N64. Didn't play it on the... Was the 64 the first one? No, I feel like there was... Maybe it was. Yeah, 64 was the first one. Double Dash, I think I played once. Had a lot of fun with it. My cousin had it. We played it over Thanksgiving night, something like that. One of the holidays. That was a lot of fun, having all the cousins over there in the chaos for Double Dash. But yeah, the Wii version was my first that I like really got into. We talked about the Pokemon franchise. At least the main title games, Gens 1, 2, 3, were big for me. More 2 and 3. When it got to 4 in the DS, that was where I kind of slipped off for a while until X and Y. So there's a few of those that I've missed. I have played the remaster for Diamond and Pearl. It was fine. Sun and Moon couldn't catch my attention. And the recent one, Sword and Shield, and Scarlet Violet, I did enjoy. Other than that, at least in terms of the main titles, those ones I definitely played. We talked about the missing Pokemon Snap. We talked about getting some experience with Pokemon Stadium. But yeah. Call of Duties. First one for me was COD 4, Modern Warfare, which I think was a lot of people's, like, at least that was the boom period, was 4, Modern Warfare 2. Then you get the weird naming conventions. Then you got the Black Ops period with the Zombies mode. I think after after Modern Warfare 3, that was my drop-off point. Played a little bit of Black Ops 2 in that zombie mode, but definitely years after they had come out. Diablo. Diablo was one I was late to. And this was one that I didn't really have a lot of interest in. I did enjoy, as we talked about previously, I did enjoy the Warcrafts, the original RTS. Didn't enjoy World. Very, very briefly dipped my toes into StarCraft. And when Diablo happened, I was like, I don't know, just running around, smacking stuff. I did play it with some friends, and I was kind of dragged through the experience. So I was like, not for me. So I don't know too much about that world. Didn't really get too much about the story or anything about what was going on. I know a lot of people do enjoy it. I know, obviously, Diablo 4 coming out this year took off. But that's probably another gap. Animal Crossing. Let's go back to Nintendo for a bit. Animal Crossing was huge for Nintendo, I heard. Was it the GameCube? Was the first one? I don't know. It seemed like a lot of people talked about the GameCube version in terms of like, oh, this is the one. This is great. Didn't play the first one until New Horizons. Pandemic obviously helped a lot with that. Like, hey, what else are we going to do? There's nothing else. Obviously, if you had work to go to or work at home, you had that time to spend. But yeah, New Horizons was a fun experience, jumping into that for the first time and being this almost communal game where everybody was talking about it online amongst friends. So just learning from each other, like, oh, this works. You can manipulate the system this way, or this is how you get this friend, and hunting them down. Oh, I got this villager, whatever it was. That was a lot of fun. I did enjoy jumping into that, but that was my first experience. No other experience besides that one. So don't have much history there. I'm going to give Mass Effect a shout out here, and I'm only going to say this is kind of a gap just because, once again, it's another one that a lot of people talk about, but it didn't click with me. I guess it's one of those 50-50, like, hey, at least I tried it. I tried Mass Effect 1, played it through all the way, and for some reason it just didn't get my hooks into me. I don't know if it was just the social mechanic, just like, oh, you got to talk to everybody, and everybody's got quests, and everybody's got this, and the Paragon and Renegade, like, role-playing type mechanics. That didn't get me. The gunplay was fine. The different ammo types, at least in terms of my experience, didn't make any kind of difference. So I was just kind of steamrolling through it. But never engaged me enough to be like, oh, I want to play 2, I want to play 3. Even though I hear, obviously, it gets better from that first one. But it's just not for me. Okay, this one I've played, but I will say this was a gap, at least for a while for me. It was the Resident Evil series. I did not play a Resident Evil, well, 1, because I was a scaredy cat, and 2 for the longest time until RE7. And I think the reason I was so excited to jump into it was just because of some content creators I was watching. They were really hyped for it, and watching them experience it was like, you know what, that looks fun. Let me jump into it. So 7 was my first one. Luckily, they've been remaking them and re-releasing them since, with RE2 remake, RE3, recently RE4 as of this year, and then continuing the series with RE8. Those have all been great. I haven't played much of RE4, but the ones I have played, the other 4 titles, were great. No experience with the originals, obviously, or the original game with RE1. But the time I have spent with these ones I have enjoyed. I'm looking forward to experiencing more with RE4 and seeing where we go from there. If we're going to go back to the PlayStation side of things, so for the longest time, my PlayStation 3 was my remaster console. And what I mean by that is like, oh, what PS2 games did I like? Oh, they have HD collections of the games on PS3. I'm going to play them there. So your Sly Cooper, your Ratchet and Clank, your Jak and Daxter, your Kingdom Hearts, like those were the ones that I was like, that's what I'm going to use my PlayStation 3 for. I'm going to play these games in the collections in their high def form at that time. And that I'm not really going to expand outside that bubble too much. I eventually did get into the God of Wars. I eventually got into the Uncharted's. I don't think I got into Uncharted until PlayStation 4 around time. Last Guardian, I know a lot of people talk about. Is Last Guardian the one I played? Or was it... it's confusing. There's the one with the horse and the boy. I don't think that's Last Guardian. That's... hold on. No, Last Guardian's the dog flying thing. Yeah. So I haven't played Last Guardian. What am I thinking about? Shadow of the Colossus. Didn't play that until PlayStation 4 as well. Journey I was late to. So a lot of the PlayStation catalog I was late to, and I'm sure there's a bunch in there that are like, oh, this is a staple on PlayStation 3. You didn't play that. Haven't played the Resistance series. I know that's another big one. I have played Infamous. Did enjoy those. Scrolling down here, if we're going to go more PC side of things, I guess also technically Xbox, at least with the second iteration. Half-Life. Haven't played a Half-Life. I don't know what the buzz is about that with Mr. Gordon and the story there. Only dipped my toes into Castlevania. That was another one on the, I believe it was Nintendo, the NES. So no idea of that. Well, we talked RPGs. Chrono Trigger. I know a lot of people like that one, and that's a big acclaimed one. Let's see, 25. Is this all time? It is. Okay, let's look through this one more list. See if this rings any bells. Oh, here we go. Now I just got them in the list. Assassin's Creed we did play. Battlefield we did play. Fallout. Yeah, I put a decent enough time into that. Okay, this list sucks. This one did not help. I was late to The Last of Us. I've talked about my experiences with Last of Us. First one, even with a replay, I don't know. Not my most favorite thing, but the second one I absolutely loved. But that was another one I was late to the party with. Yeah, I don't know. What other games did I miss? What are some ones that you guys think have slipped past me? Obviously, there's a lot of games out there. Only a little bit amount of time to play them, as you can see with the backlog conversation that we've had over the years. Of just like, oh, that came out. I missed that one. There's a lot of games out there, a lot of experiences. But what do you think? What are some big experiences you would recommend for gamers alike that you think they should experience? And yeah, we'll go from there. But this has been another episode of The Wait Where We Talk About Podcast. Everybody, my name is Bret, aka Enigma911. You can catch the podcast live over on twitch.tv/Enigma911. You drop a follow over there. You'll get notified when we go live, so you can join on the fun and the conversation. But if you can't catch it live, that's A-OK. You can go over to YouTube or podcast services the very next week. It's broken out topic by topic and put as one big video, an MP3, for your amusement on the following Friday. Last but not least, any way you can support the show: likes, comments, shares, subscriptions, reviews, whatever it is. It may seem small, but does help the channel grow. So if you take the time to do that, we would love and appreciate you for it. Appreciate you guys hanging out today for this video game discussion. Once again, let me know what are some of your favorite games in the comment section. And yeah, we'll see if I played them or I didn't. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Thanks for giving this a watch, giving it a listen. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.